Hello and welcome back to our study in the book of Romans. This is in partnership with Rob Trevino and his platform. God's Word is Final.com, hisloveforme.com, and youshallknowthetruth.org. You can find these classes there on those platforms. We're going to be in lesson 6 today, continuing our study through the book of Romans. And so last week, we talked about in chapter 2, Paul's been saying that well, let me back up. In chapter 1, he says the Gentiles are guilty. Chapter 2, the Jews are guilty. They're not off the hook, and the Jews more so because they had the oracles of God. They knew better. And in chapter 2, verses 25 through 29, we have Paul saying, it doesn't matter if you are circumcised physically, but what matters is the circumcision of the heart, because they already broke the law. See, these Jewish Christians were still trying to hold on to the new covenant and the tenets of the new covenant and the law of Moses. But in verses 17 through 24, Paul says, by leaving the law of Moses, those Jewish Christians already broke the law, so there's no use in trying to bind that. The old law, when they became Christians, they already broke the law. And so he says in verses 28 and 29, here's the heart of the matter. Circumcision of the heart matters, not the circumcision of the flesh. And Paul makes this distinction because, again, the Jewish Christians were trying to bind the law of Moses on the Gentiles. And Paul says, look, you Jews, the circumcision of the flesh avails nothing anymore. By the way, you Jews, you are binding something from a law you abandoned. So, in chapter 3, we got into a little bit of chapter 3 last week, and he talks about what advantage, he asks the question, what advantage has the Jew over the Gentile? And verse 2, he says, chapter 3, verse 2, much in any way. They first had the oracles of God, but they were faithless to God. And so now in chapter 3, verses 9 through 21, Paul's going to make the point that both Jew and Gentile have sinned. It does not matter if you had the law like the Jews did and had a relationship with God, had that type of a relationship with God through the law of Moses, or you are a Gentile living living without the law, living by your conscience. Both Jew and Gentile have sinned. So let's go ahead and read verses 9 through 21. What then? Are we better than they? Not at all. For we charge both Jew and Gentiles that all that they are all under sin. Verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks after God. They have all turned aside. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they practice deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, no flesh will be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin. Verses 10 through 18, there is a group called Calvinists that use this particular chapter to promote the false doctrine of total depravity. They say there is none that does good, no, not one. You're born evil. Well, is that what the text says? We're gonna see what the text actually says. Paul is playing off of many Old Testament passages, and by Paul bringing them over, Paul is also using their same context. So, uh, so he starts in verse 9. What then? Are the Jews better than the Gentiles? By no means, all are under sin. Just because they have the law, they have the oracles of God, doesn't mean they were better moral people. They all have sinned, as it is written. These quotations are from multiple passages in the Bible. And to gain understanding, we must go back to these quotes. We must look at what is being quoted and not just rip it out of context. And so he says in verse 10, none is righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none who seek after God. We'll stop there. Let's look at some of the passages Paul is quoting from. This is where our Calvinist friends like to camp. See, they say, see, there's none righteous, none does good, total depravity. Well, what is going on in these texts? Well, the first passage that I found that Paul is quoting from here is Psalm 14, 1 through 3. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. Verse 3, they have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There's none who does good, not even one. What type of people is the psalmist talking about? Is this all people? Is man, everybody morally corrupt? Notice this. The children of man. In verse 2, the Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. Now, if you read in Genesis, the first time the children of man are mentioned, and they are coming down, and they appear with the sons of God in Genesis 6, and they have relations. The daughters of the sons of God and the daughters of man come together. And in that context, that was in the days of the flood. And we read in Genesis 6 and about verse 5 that the world was evil. And so children of men are here described in Genesis 6 as evil people. They're corrupt people. They're unrighteous. So who is not righteous? Who doesn't seek after God? Well, if we go with the context of what Paul's quoting here in verses 10 and 11, it is the fool. It is the children of man, people who are earthly minded, just like children of men, the children of men we read in Genesis 6, who had sexual relations with women, and the earth became evil because all men have corrupted their ways. Notice that verse 3 says in this text, they have all turned aside. They made a free will choice to become corrupt. They were good, but the children of man, as they are described, have turned their backs on God. And so here's another passage that this is taken from. Isaiah 53, 1 through 3. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable iniquity. There is none who does good. God looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all fallen away. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. That is a parallel passage to chapter 14 of Psalms, and notice again who he is talking about. It's the fool, the ones who are doing abominable iniquity, those that are not seeking after God. And so, in this group, in this quote that Paul brings over, the context of the quote is talking about the wicked, not the righteous, not all mankind, but the wicked. again, Ecclesiastes 7:20. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. See, you can be righteous, but you can you can stumble. And so we go to verse 12. They have all turned aside. They together become unprofitable. There's none who does good, no, not one. Just notice with me first, they have all turned aside. This people, this group of people that Paul is quoting have turned aside. They weren't born aside. They together become unprofitable. They weren't born that way. They became unprofitable. There's none who does good, no, not one. And these, in verse 12, quotes again from the passages that we looked at from Psalm 14, 53, and Psalm and Ecclesiastes 7:20. Then in verse 13 we read this. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongue they practice deceit. Who does this? Is it the righteous? Is it everybody? Well, notice the quote. Psalm 5:8-9. Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make your way straight before me. For there is no truth in their mouth. Their inmost self is destruction. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with the tongue. Notice, it's the enemies of the psalmist. If I'm correct here, Psalm 5 is written by David. The enemies of David, their mouth is destruction. There's no truth in their mouth, and the innermost self, and their innermost self is destruction, and their throat is an open tomb. And again, another quote in Psalm 114, 1-3. Deliver me, O Lord, from evil men. Preserve me from violent men who plan evil things in their heart and stir up wars continually. They make their tongues sharp as serpents, and under their lips are venoms of asps. Again, what type of people is the psalmist talking about? Everybody, all men everywhere? No. Evil men. Preserve me from evil men, from violent men. So we have to go back and see what the context of the quote is. Verse 14, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. That is from Psalm 10, 3-7. For the wicked boasts of the desires of his soul, and the one greedy for gain curses and renounces the Lord. In the pride of his face, the wicked does not seek him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. His ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high out of his sight. As for all his foes, he puffs at them. He says in his heart, I shall not be moved. Throughout all generations, I shall not meet adversity. His mouth is filled with cursing and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue are mischief and iniquity. Again, who is the psalmist talking about? The wicked. The wicked boast of the desires of his soul. Verse 4 of Psalm 10. The wicked does not seek him. And verse 7, his mouth is filled with cursing and deceit, oppression. Under his tongue are mischief and iniquity. It's talking about people who are wicked already. Their feet swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, verse 16. The way of peace they have not known, verse 17. Those three quotes are quoted from Proverbs 1:11 through 16. You probably know this passage. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like shields, let us swallow them alive, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw any lot among us. We will all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to the devil, and they make haste to shed blood. Again, Solomon's talking to his son about sinners. If sinners entice you, do not consent. And he says, for their feet run to the devil, and they make haste to shed innocent blood. And again, another quote talking about the way of peace they have not known, Isaiah 59:7-8. Their feet run to evil, and they are swift to shed innocent blood. Their thoughts are iniquity, desolation, and destruction are in their highways. The path of peace they do not know. There is no justice in their paths. They have made their roads crooked. No one who treats on them knows peace. Isaiah 59:7-8. Again, these are people who are evil, whose thoughts are full of iniquity. The way of peace they have not known. There's no justice in them. Again, talking about the wicked. And then in verse 18, the last part of this big quote, there is no fear of God before their eyes. So this is quoted from Psalm 36:1. Transgression speaks to the wicked. Talking about the wicked again. Deep in his heart there is no fear of God before his eyes, the wicked's eyes. Then we come to verse 19. He says, whatever the law of Moses says, it speaks to those who are under the law of Moses, making law guilty before God. This is why the law of Moses is insufficient. It's designed to make people guilty. It is designed for sins to be remembered. It's a system in which there is sacrifices reminding the people how bad uh, they are. And that's why he says in verse 19b, by the works of the law, no flesh will be justified in the sight. Why? Uh, why? With the knowledge of the law comes sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. This directly comes back all the way where we started this study. The Jews are not better than the Gentiles because all have sinned. What then? Are we better than they? Not at all. For we have previously charged both Jews and Greeks that they are all under sin. Both Jew and Gentile have sinned. No one is exempt from that. And now he says, by the works of the law of Moses, no one will be justified, and it does not matter whether you are a Jew under the law or a Gentile without the law. All are under sin. Thank you for joining me. That's all I have for this week. Thank you for joining me. And Lord willing, we'll see you next week. If you want to find more episodes of this, you can go to hisloveforme.com, youshallknowthetruth.org, and God's word is final.com. Until next week, have a safe rest of your week. God bless.